We call it the rainforest in the desert. We're not just writing checks, they're innovators. And they've been told they need to go start a company. We actually don't believe that's true. Some folks just get really good at innovating technology and not actually getting products into the marketplace. So that's a good thing, but too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. I would rather have an A team and a B product than an A product and a B team. An angel shouldn't be expected to be an expert at all things. Take a look at how government programs are leveraging more innovation in the startup space. No one wants to be the greatest fool. No one wants to be first. Everyone wants to be second or later. Those are hard. But this idea of people coming together and acting collaboratively is a very strong force. It's hard what they're doing. They're choosing a path that's the road less traveled, and they should be rewarded for it.
Welcome to the Diligent Observer, the first podcast exclusively focused on helping angel investors make better bets. I'm your host, Andrew, and every week we explore what works, what doesn't, and why through conversations with experienced startup investors and operators. My guest today is Drew Tulchin, president of New Mexico Angels, one of the oldest angel groups in the country, and the former CFO of Meow Wolf, an artist collective where he helps raise over $125 million. In this episode, Drew shares his take on building startup ecosystems in smaller markets, leveraging government research grants effectively, and why he focuses on companies solving real-world problems in space tech, biomedical, and climate, rather than chasing AI trends. I hope you enjoy learning from Drew as much as I do. Drew, thanks for being with me today.
Great to be here, Andrew.
Okay, so I want to start, Drew, just by unpacking a little bit of what's exciting right now. You are deeply immersed in the angel investing ecosystem, specifically in New Mexico. What's exciting to you right now that you're seeing?
So I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, not necessarily known as a hotbed of startup life. I get to be president of New Mexico Angels. We're a 22-year-old angel group. We're a nonprofit organization. We're like a chamber of commerce, legally a 501c6 if you're super geeky like me. We've got a 501c3 nonprofit education arm. There's lots of good news happening in the startup world across a lot of different sectors. We're less motivated around AI, which statistically, according to PitchBook and others, is the place where a lot of money's going into. And so we've got a lot of folks in space. We've got biomedical. We've got some consumer products. We've got a lot of climate-related things, climate defined widely. And that feels like a lot, and that's quite enough. So those are some of the trends in the sectors where we're really pleased and we're glad to see some progress.
So talk a little bit more about the space work and the collaboration with defense labs, obviously Los Alamos being the most well-known. Talk more about how you see entrepreneurs and startups interacting with that space.
It's fun to be in a place that's known more for its names. For those of you who saw Oppenheimer, the movie, that's Los Alamos National Labs, born during wartime, but still doing quite a lot. And in a small place like ours, to have $1 billion kind of lab or business is a big deal. It really drives our economy. There's quite a lot happening in space in New Mexico. For those of you who want to take out a map, we'd called ourselves Space Valley. And that's a terminology, both our valley where the Rio Grande River runs, but also more widely, we've got a spaceport in the south, right? And then going all the way up to Colorado, which has quite a lot of military U.S. defense and private space efforts, and then go all the way east over to Houston. You've got this triangle where there's a lot of stuff happening. Some of it's secret that you haven't heard about and won't. Some of it is just it's next cutting edge stuff, throwing different types of rockets into the sky. Private sector were innovations in various parts of space. We've got one company called Solstar Space, and they've got something that sounds simple. They're doing wireless in space. And you're like, we got wireless. Why don't you just, throw out a little router and put it up there? But it's quite a puzzle. And it also has quite a number of really amazing benefits. So for every pound you can take out of a rocket or a space capsule, and every inch that you don't have with technology stuff, that's more things, that's more efficiency on fuel, that's longer and further that this device can go, and the more other things like experiments I can put in there. So them just trying to do wireless is revolutionary in its little corner. And we're really proud to have them. Right now, they're mostly getting money from government, but we've written checks, and there has been both angel as well as a few early VCs writing modest checks as they continue to grow and make progress towards this goal.
So obviously you guys are doing a lot of work in conjunction with the government, defense industry, all that. Government funding programs can get very complex very quickly, and the average angel has pretty limited understanding and grasp of that scope. Say a little bit more about how you guys diligence some of these government funding programs, the impact of private dollars versus grant dollars, and how the New Mexico Angels think about that.
It's nice to have some of these companies that we like be able to receive capital from other places so they're not just relying upon us or the private investor. On the other extreme, if they only get government money, they have a tendency to then be rewarded and be seeking those rewards of where that capital's come from. It's pretty natural human behavior. So what does that look like? Sometimes you become what's called an SBIR shop, right? SBIR are the government research grants, also as TTRs. And so some folks just get really good at that, at innovating technology and not actually getting products into the marketplace. So that's a good thing, but too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. We have one of our partners here in New Mexico that's called Tramway Ventures, and Tramway mostly focuses on biosciences, but they did a market research report and they've got a really nice infographic that we refer to that anyone can look at. You can take a look at their portfolio, you can take a look at the companies they've helped, all of whom have some connection to New Mexico, and then you can take a look at how government programs are leveraging more innovation in a startup space. And we like that because no one wants to be the greatest fool, right? No one wants to be first. Everyone wants to be second or later. And so if this company, this entrepreneur has received capital, even if it's different types of capital, even if it's government free money, somebody's done due diligence, right? And to get an SBIR is not an easy thing. You've got to be organized. You got to have registered your company. You got to have accounting. So we know that they've got their books together, which is a good thing and no easy feat for an early company. And they've answered some questions to professionals, national people who vetted them. So it's not a be all end all, but it is nice guarantee.
What are 2 or 3 of your favorite diligence questions to ask the typical entrepreneur that's presenting and says, hey, look, we've got all these grant dollars. What's your first 1, 2, 3 questions as you start to open up that back end?
Due diligence is such an important issue, especially for those of us who are doing the angel stuff, the really early stuff. And it can be scary or unknown. And so we really like the herd mentality or the pack mentality. That's why I've chosen to work with an angel group and why you and I met through Angel Capital Association to do national networking and what's called syndication, right? You'll take a deal that we or somebody has written a check for and share it on an informed basis with somebody else. That's really valuable. An angel shouldn't be expected to be an expert at all things. If someone claims they are, I don't think they're really doing themselves any favors, right? You could draw upon your own experience, which you should, but you might have some knowledge in a certain sector or perhaps sectors and use that. But I really like kind of the common universal questions that are needed for any angel team. People talk about the jockey or the horse. And I really think that I would rather have an A team and a B product or B marketplace than an A product and a B team. And so I personally am going to be more interested in meeting the people, understanding who they are, seeing how they behave, ideally seeing them over a couple of situations. I'm not going to just meet them once by phone or by video and write a check. It's just not realistic. And so it's basically character. And those are the biggest elements. It might seem trite. It might be feeling like people are overlooking parts of the equation. But who somebody is and how they behave, not just in the good times when they're pitching or presenting or kind of selling, but also in trying times or difficult or ambiguous diplomatic situations. That really shows who somebody is and how they usually behave in the world.
Can you give an example or two for maybe a company that at first you were like, no, I'm not interested, and then you got to know the founder better and it changed your tune?
There's a company called Dash LX, and they're looking at kind of big data and helping sports brands be able to reach their customers a lot better. And Adam Stepanovic is the CEO, brilliant guy, super smart, worked at Google, graduate school, data. But in between introverted and extroverted, he's probably more introverted than he is extroverted, which is to be assumed. But he's a very stand-up guy. It's just that his style isn't to kind of radiate and shake hands with everybody in the room and so forth. And so he doesn't reek of that. But the other side of that is he's literally a Boy Scout, right? And he's very honest. He's hardworking. This guy runs like 100-mile races, ultra marathons and stuff. So, he's tough. He's mentally tough. He's not going to quit. And getting a chance to meet him and see him over time really had us understand who he was, what the company was, and why we thought this was a good relationship.
Drew, I feel like there's this common theme I'm noticing in the angel space around particular technical ventures that have kind of a deep technology, or it's a scientist background, someone with a PhD, or a decade of research experience. When they come to the table, they're perhaps not the best presenter. They're not able to communicate their ideas as clearly. And I actually think that those entrepreneurs represent some of the greatest opportunity for alpha in the angel space, because many angels will walk away because they don't understand it, or the presentation wasn't clean. Would you agree with that, or no?
I think I might be a little less patient than you are, Andrew, which is a really interesting thing to think about. Certainly, our engineers, our scientists, our professors, they got good at something for a reason. And it wasn't necessarily public speaking, which people say is the third most frightening thing, right? We shouldn't expect them to be. But if they would like to see their innovation succeed, they're going to have to behave in a manner that allows either the innovation, if it's an early thing, not even a company yet, or a company, if it's already corporately registered, to be able to grow and be the best it can be. And that to me means building a team. And just as an entrepreneur needs to communicate with an angel or convince them, they need to do the same thing with the team. Usually it's the team that's the first investors of sweat, time, treasure, talent. And so if someone comes to me and they're a solopreneur and they've been at this for years and years and years, but it's just them, I'm like, well, why is it just you? Who else do you engage with in the world? And how is it that you aren't able to recruit the ions to start building more substance around what you're doing? And so that's what occurs to me. And I don't know how eloquent that is, but that's kind of my feeling is like, who is this entity? If it's an innovation because it's so early, or is it a company? Who is this and what do they want?
What do you think is the right timing for a more technical founder to come to Jesus and say, okay, I need a communicator, a business person to take the helm and step into a lot of what you're talking about? How do you work with entrepreneurs as they think through that transition?
I think the American mythos of exceptionalism and kind of the Bill Gates of the world, the entrepreneurs story, I think actually does a disservice. We in New Mexico, we have our national labs, we have LANL, we have Sandia, we have AFRL, which is the Air Force Resource Laboratory, which is a DoD related. And then we have our universities, University of New Mexico Tech, New Mexico State University. And I think sometimes these folks, I won't even call them entrepreneurs sometimes, they're innovators. And they've been told they need to go start a company. And we actually don't believe that's true. Our statement is if you're a professor, teach kids, teach the next generation, do research, get people around you and be the innovator, but then work with your institution or your university, for example, on your patents, your tech transfer office, and build a group towards the solution to bring this into the marketplace. We have a little bit of a different thing on this, and it's disarming because I think entrepreneurs or professors or engineers or scientists have been told about this thing, and so they feel they need to do this thing. We have to either unlearn them or help share what our perspective is and see if it resonates.
Okay, let's pivot a little bit. Tell me more about the New Mexico Angels. What's the history? 22 years. You guys are one of the older angel communities. Band of Angels, one of the first angel groups in the mid 90s. You guys were formed just a few years after that. Walk me through kind of the history of your community and how you first got involved, what it's looked like since then.
The state of New Mexico is small, right? We're the sixth largest in volume, in size, but we only have 3 Congress people. So we got 3 million people. And so it's a small place. It's a rural place. And there just aren't that many people. So those of you who are angels in more urban areas, there's a lot more events, there's more density, whether it's an accelerator, an incubator, whether it's just angel groups or multiple angel groups, whether it's VCs. We're a small community and it's kind of a frontier mentality where you have to do the barn raising. Yeah, you make it because you involve other people. And also because our wealth is modest, we're not going to be the ones writing the only checks into these companies. It's going to take kind of the pooled effort, the veritable stone soup, if you know that story. Everyone takes something and adds it into the water, and then you mix it up and you make a yummy mixture. New Mexico, that's why people started coming together, because it was hard to understand things. So 22 years ago, we didn't have the social media. We didn't have the ubiquitous access to the internet that we do now. And the group started small. Our founders were business people who were curious minds. They wanted to help other companies. They wanted to help entrepreneurs, and they wanted to see their community grow. And so it was kind of a coffee klatch. It was just kind of getting together, share what people knew, do it informally. Then it evolved into a supper club. So once a quarter, people get together, they socialize. You get a lawyer or a bank or somebody like that, some other vendor, pay for the bar tab. You can meet some entrepreneurs. They can pitch. People can raise their hands if they'd like to learn more. You form a due diligence group, and you kind of go off and do due diligence after that. And then COVID happened, and New Mexico is a pretty strong in-person state. It was really difficult. Plus, nobody wants to wish COVID on anybody. There's a lot of pain, particularly in our Native American, our rural communities where you had multi-generational families living together. So it was a really tough time, and business people really wanted to see how they could help their neighborhood, their cities, their neighbors, and others. And so there was a strong motivation to see how venture and how angeldom could help make our communities better, produce jobs, get these companies going. I took over 4 years ago during COVID. We started online. It was a difficult thing. Can you imagine only meeting an entrepreneur online or maybe waving at them outdoors, if you remember those days? It's hard to build that level of trust and understanding to support an entrepreneur and be able to be willing to write a check. So those were hard. But this idea of people coming together and acting collaboratively is a very strong force. And I think I encourage anyone listening to this who's been an individual or an independent to not overlook doing it with other people, whether it's friends, whether it's family, whether it's a family office, or whether it's joining an organization.
And what's the growth trajectory for your community look like? What are you guys focused on? What's important as you continue to see the local ecosystem grow?
We're still a small organization, right? Our colleagues to the north in Colorado, Rockies Venture Club, we look up to them. They taught us a lot. They're very structured. They're a great place. They really care about the whole state. So there's a lot of things that others have done. Our friends in San Diego with New Fund, our friends in the LA area, Tech Coast Angels has a number of chapters. And then there's a whole network of folks in Texas. So there's a lot of people doing good work. I think in general, the idea of an angel group is a good one. And we are a little different because we're not just writing checks. We call it time, treasure, talent. So sweat equity is as equally important. Having people with a little bit of extra time and expertise help an entrepreneur on their journey, to give them feedback, to help them get game ready, to help people access these government sources and other programs that I mentioned before. All of those things are important and part of an ecosystem. And we call it the ecosystem of the rainforest in the desert.
The rainforest in the desert. Why do you call it that?
Yeah, because an ecosystem, you normally think of an ecosystem in the jungle where you have this symbiotic a way that things are living together and kind of the vines are growing on the trees that have the birds and the birds are feeding and these things kind of cycle of life stuff. And in the desert, it's a little harsher, but there is this interconnectivity. And for someone to say, oh, we did it by ourselves, we did it alone, that's not really what our experience has been. You do it because of a lot of other people and people being helpful and a lot of other institutions adding to the pieces along the way.
And you personally are clearly leaning into that. I know you're very active with the Angel Capital Association. Could you talk a little bit more about the work you're doing on a national scale?
Yeah, I mean, New Mexico, we don't have all the answers, right? We need to learn from others. We need to connect with others. There needs to be cross-pollination. There needs to be interconnectivity. Syndication is a really important thing for us. We want to both receive deals and also share deals, particularly if we've written a check for a New Mexican company. We generally feel that we're a little more isolated than a lot. So to give them the chance to make it to a regional or a national stage, something we're really motivated about. And we'd be happy to share deals. People can find our companies on our website, nmangels.com/portfolio. And then we have a affiliated but separate legal entity that's called the New Mexico Vintage Fund, a vintage like a wine every year. So folks who are interested in diversification and would like to support a number of companies within a period of time pool their money, and it's essentially managed. It's professionally managed by 4 people and 1 or 4 GPs, general partners. And so the New Mexico Vintage Fund portfolio, you can look at that and see the companies that have joined there. We really want to show off these companies. There's a lot of ways to help them beyond just writing a check as an equity investor. Sometimes as they grow, there can be debt. Many folks might need talent. So to get the hirings that they need to help them with biz dev and sales. So there's a lot of ways to help a startup. An Angel Capital Association is kind of the trade group, the fund of funds, if you will, the folks that are bringing together and linking the angel groups is a natural place for us to affiliate, be a member, and then to join their national event. Their upcoming 2025 conference is in Denver in April. If people get this in a timely fashion, you can join and look to attend. If you are watching this as an archive on a library, it's an annual event, so you can find out where they are. They switch between the coasts and the middle of the country.
Drew, any other common misconceptions or things that out-of-state angels often don't understand or don't think about when they think of investing in New Mexico?
There's a couple, both in New Mexico and I think 25 states or so. There's this tax credit. Each state has chosen to do it differently, but by you or one investing, you can gain a financial benefit back. And since this is such high risk, anything that can help in terms of rate return or kind of a return is helpful. So in the state of New Mexico, if you're a New Mexican taxpayer, you can get 25% back on a qualifying investment, an equity investment. And so that's pretty good. Right out of the gate, you've earned 25 cents back on your dollar, which makes it a lot more palatable. And a lot of other states have this as well. We don't have it in our state so that it's transferable. Some states do. That is a limitation, but I bring it up for you, particularly if you're newer to Angeldom and you haven't heard about it. You might take a look again. It's another reason to talk to one of your local associations or organizations because they're probably going to know about it and might be able to help you. And so the cost to be a member and join might be worth it just for the savings of what you can earn back on an investment. So that is one opportunity that I like to share with people. I think the other thing about New Mexico is people like to come visit. Santa Fe is usually pretty well known. Taos, which is a ski place. And so come see it. Come experience the physicality of what we have here. Come visit our Native American and indigenous communities, and then get to know some of the companies that are located here, but doing things like clean water or renewable energy or carbon capture, which are universal needs both throughout the United States and around the world.
And where would you say most of the entrepreneurial startup activity is located? Is that primarily in Santa Fe? Is it Albuquerque? Break down kind of the percentage of mental map. Where would you think of the startup ecosystem focusing in New Mexico?
Albuquerque is our biggest city. It's in the middle of the state. And the greater MSA, the metropolitan area, is 1 million people. And so that is most of our folks. Santa Fe has our government and has innovation, but it's small. And a lot of the people here aren't necessarily engaged in day-to-day business. We get a lot of people with second homers and stuff. Las Cruces is the other place. It's rural, but there's interconnected because we're so small. So it's very easy to navigate. If people do have interest in our state and there's something you need, it's pretty easy. You can get in touch with us at nmangels.com, info at, and it's an easy way to be able to get your questions answered and find the resources you need.
Drew, last question for you. What would you say are some of the key lessons that you've learned over the last 4 years helming New Mexico Angels? What are some of the key takeaways, things that stand out to you during this season?
I think overall, I'm optimistic both about the industry and on entrepreneurs, and I like to be optimistic for our entrepreneurs. It's hard what they're doing. They're choosing a path that's the road less traveled, and they should be rewarded for it. They deserve our empathy and our sympathy. Sometimes they don't always do things that are as easy to love. They can be brash. They can be a little impulsive. They can be kind of a lot of words sometimes, which is one of the things that we appreciate about them. But in a different context, maybe it's not as helpful. And so I think for those of us, particularly with business experience or have done the angeldom route a bit, is to help educate. It doesn't have to be browbeating and explicit, but be a model, give some time, be patient, but then also help with what does work so that they can learn. For example, an entrepreneur pitches a group or pitches you and you don't like it, but instead of just saying, hey, look, I'm not going to invest, but let me give you some feedback. You just kind of do the polite, oh, thanks very much. We'll be in touch. And then you aren't in touch because you're busy or because you don't really want to follow up. And I think that doesn't help us. I think it doesn't take that much time to be honest with people and just be straightforward and say, hey, look, this is my opinion. This is my perspective. I'm not trying to argue with you, but let me just tell you what I'm seeing and how I see this and what I'm perceiving. And I think that those are often very important. And so I would encourage our angels to give generously and to be helpful.
Well, Drew, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I look forward to seeing you in Santa Fe soon and for sure in Denver early next year.
Great. Thanks so much. Appreciate your work. Glad you're doing this. And thanks to all the angels out there who are doing this work.
Thanks for listening to this episode of The Diligent Observer. I'm your host, Andrew Taslow, and if you are looking to make better bets as an angel investor, subscribe for more at thediligentobserver.substack.com.